cup. So, you know, I mean, what can you say? He's a champion, and let's see what he can back it up with.
Probably not a lot. I know that I spoke with DTs who happened to be paired with Maloney at Menstown, Stinson Beach.
Yeah.
And he said Maloney behaved like a jackass, could not handle his liquor, and then became quite vindictive and spited when it was Maloney who failed to help that team move on to the next level.
Seems to be a recurring pattern with the DT's teams, is that there's always a problem with the partner.
I don't know about that.
You know, whether it's pouring beer on them or not performing up to speed.
No, I don't know about that.
Too much gas, or they're not drinking enough, or drinking too little, or they
all right, let's get on to it.
They can't hit.
Here's the most overrated and highly ranked contestant so far is Levette at number 3. Last year it was number 3. I don't know who's making their rankings, but I got a question for them. Are you high? Was anybody there at Menstown last year when he had a complete meltdown? They got to the semis of both, and he basically the liquor hit him, and he faded out like a wet blanket. He ran up the hill, and the next time we saw him, he was in like a toga robe. I saw pictures of him. He was in a toga robe, like kind of curled up in a fetal position.
Yeah, I think for some it would be sad. For me, it was just concerning to see that footage of him up on the hill. Like, you know, what's the problem here? Obviously, he wasn't well. I think he championed through as far as he could. Obviously sweeping through to the semis in both brackets, and then just the meltdown on the beer pong table just triggered everything. I think going in this year, there's questions about his heart, his mental capacity to handle the pressure. It's easy when you're, that talented to win and get to the semis as quickly as he did, but from there, can you put it together? And obviously, he couldn't. And whether it was alcohol-induced or just a mental breakdown, there's questions about Levette here, and I think I wouldn't call it a chance at draft day. But, will he go number 1 even as the 3 seed? I think last year he would have. Maybe not this year.
Maybe, actually, he might go where he should go, which would be around 6 or 7. Up next, Benny. He's our 2nd seed. Last year he was number 1. And here's my beef. I went through the brackets. I went through the tape. When Benny is with a partner whom he has similar skill sets, he does well. But he goes up with Delsano, and he had probably the weakest fade out of any past champion in any tournament. There was no fight in Menstown.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. The most concerning thing was almost this ambivalence that we saw out of a perennial champion in Benny. Partnered with Delsano, which I thought was a nice match.
Oh yeah,
Delsano is a real athlete. He's an intense enough guy to rise to the occasion, and I think he can play well enough on the boards and on the pong table from the limited bit we've seen.
Sure.
To compete, I think it just it came down to, is Ben Assini a believer in what he's doing? And I think in that year he wasn't, and they faded out.
Well, it would be distressing for me. That's why I don't believe he should be this second person picked off the board. I would actually put him around 7 or 8. And our number 1 player, Clay, last year he was 2.
Yep.
He won last year, so he's now ranked number 1. A lot of people questioning, did Clay actually imbibe the necessary amount of alcohol to qualify for even the tournament? Was the guy drinking?
Yeah,
and I saw photos of him, and to be honest, he didn't pass the rouge test. That's where when his cheeks get gradually pinker, the more alcohol he drinks. And those cheeks were pink. They weren't pink.
Well, you're right that the Asians can't hide their alcohol, can they? But I think I'm a little tired of the argument, the excuse by the other Menstown contestants that, look, we can't beat this guy because he's an Asian, or his cheeks are too red, or he's not drinking enough, or he's doing this, or he looks like an idiot. I don't care what the argument is. I think it's bogus. I think you go out, whatever the rules are, and you play him. If you can't beat him, you shake his hand and give him the cup. He dominated that year only because of the meltdown that we saw with the Levet team. That didn't happen. Might be a different story.
Well, I totally disagree.
Nobody to challenge him.
The games to not drink.
Him and Maloney, he carried Maloney all the way to a championship.
Oh, he carried Maloney. I'm sure Maloney would have
number one player in the world.
Shouldn't be a number one. It should be maybe a 4 or a 5.
I think the question now, Dominic, if I was to ask DTs that question, I would say, if you had the first pick, would you take Clay? You know, would you take him as your number one pick?
Well, I had an opportunity.
If you were Dominic and you were one of these players.
Well, no, and his feeling is exactly that. I spoke with him about this, and Dominic told me straight up that he would not choose probably 4 or 5 people in that top 8. He's going to be very specific, and no one in the top 3 is going to be on his radar because they are like the used car. You know, they've already been ridden, and you know what? They really weren't that good. And there's a lot of mental issues with the 3 toppies. And also, Dominic did mention to me that he wouldn't want to choose Clay at all because he wouldn't want to choose a partner who knowingly violated the esprit de corps of Menstown by always trying to sip ginger ale instead of whiskey.
Well, I think it's interesting, your point, that, you know, do you pick the best player on the board or do you pick the player that you feel you can play the best with?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that those gentlemen in the war room are going to have to tackle. You know, they're going to have an opportunity to look at these players that night and see, you know, where they are that night. But I think going in, they're going to know, look, I can get along with this guy. I can't get along with this guy. I got some, you know, some good chemistry with this guy. I think this guy's a skilled player. They're going to have to put all that together and see where it comes out in their particular system and make that selection that's going to best fit their team.
Well, I mean, this is the time where if you're in that bottom 8 or bottom 16, you have to start doing your research now. You got to do a player profile. And I would be on the phone and emailing every other person, what is this guy like? What can he do? Is he going to be a good partner for me? You don't want to get a psychiatrist or a psychologist to do a profile to find out, is this horse going to run with me? You know?
It's pivotal. I think more every year this tournament's getting tougher and tougher to win. I think that's why we valued last year's wins so highly. If you won like we're Rosen and hadn't even been ranked, you're at 10 now because you made it to a final, sir.
Wow.
You know, I mean, this tournament this year will be more value than last because they're getting better at these games. I think there's more of a spotlight on the tournament now. And I think spreading it out a little bit and having the games kind of throughout the weekend is going to allow them to be fresher. And you're going to get your A game from a lot of these contestants. Maybe not, you know, Hilligist and a couple others, but you're going to get A game out of most of these guys. And I think it's going to be really interesting. I think we're going to see who's a real champion this year.
And I think it's a good time to also point out the addition of the new beer pong table by Damien. Has not only did the interest in beer pong was peaked, but having that dedicated table, everybody raised their games. It was amazing to see that happen. The dimensions of the table, a little smaller than a standard ping pong table, but oh boy, it's weird when you're doing a show and you're being threatened by somebody.
Yeah. Well, you know, somebody that looks like the back of a horse.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if that somebody would just come on and say what he's got to say.
That would really be refreshing, wouldn't it?
But it's something about a shirt. Don't buy a shirt.
I think his pants are coming off now.
Yeah.
Wow, will you look at that? It's not nearly as big as we thought.
Bud, it was a big pleasure.
Hey, Bud. Thank you as always.
Menstown, 2 months away, folks.
We will see you next time.